the most important thing that you also need to think of is not just the things that will make you depressed, but also the fact that solutions to this crisis are widely available. And these are summarized in the following: in power, in infrastructure, in transport, forest, agriculture. In order to reach the global goal, science has said repeatedly that it is technically and scientifically possible to keep temperatures globally at a safe level. What is the problem? It is politics that is not keeping pace. And politics, as we know, is driven by the ability of citizens to actually make its government do the right thing, make the private sector do the right thing, and make our own communities act. Where change has to take place in the most rapid way is in energy. Because as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned, energy produces the biggest harm, since we rely on fossil fuels. That is the bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions that is warming the atmosphere. But technologies are already available, and supply exceeds demand in order for us to switch as early as we can. By transitioning to clean energy as quickly as we can, studies after studies show that we actually produce more jobs when we shift to clean energy. More jobs are produced in the wind and solar and geothermal and biomass and hydro sectors than in all of fossil fuels combined. If you want a sign that things are changing, Saudi Arabia, the last place that you would ever think would make the transition, is already seeing the sign on the wall and preparing for the future. Is our country doing the same? I'm not sure. I don't think we are. The benefits outweigh reliance on fossil fuels. Yung savings is below this one, and this is the cost of renewable energy. So you will see that if this is the Philippines, this is the cost, minuscule, kasi ang laki ng renewable energy resources natin. And this is the savings. We save a lot on fuel because our energy is more secure. Kanino yung araw, kanino yung hangin? Atin. Kanino yung moving water, which is hydro? Atin. Kanino yung mainit na bato, hot rocks? That's geothermal. Atin. And rather than import hundreds of billions of pesos annually, for oil, coal, or gas, there's a lot that we can already rely on from here. Reduce air pollution, increase and improve tourism, and increase the health and well-being of our citizens. Sa Palu ito, sa Leyte. I think 10 years ago, this would have been, if I had mentioned to you, magkakaroon ng multi-mega utility scale solar farm in Palu, in Leyte. Our options are great because solar prices have been falling by 99% since 1976. China, India, Japan, everything is moving upwards in terms of clean energy. Southeast Asia, no. Why? Because governments continue to approve coal-fired power plant projects that will, based on our studies, that will prove to be uneconomical in the next 2 decades. They will be what we call stranded assets, not profitable based on the lifetime of profit that they had originally projected. Why? Because renewable energies, deflationary nature. It will continue to become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which means more and more will rely or do business with renewable energy, which means less and less will rely on coal. Because natural gas is also cheaper, and because competition will create problems for the coal-fired power plants out there. Ang problema is if the coal plants that continue to be approved are no longer profitable and they become stranded, ano ugali sa atin? Anong ginagawa ng gobyerno? Ipapasa yung pagkalugi nila sa mamamayan. Who will be left holding the bag? It will be citizens who will probably pay for the stranded coal plant contracts, the assets, because of bad business decisions of banks and coal plant developers, unless government changes policies early. First, by ensuring that we don't end up paying for their bad mistakes, and second, by stopping approval of more coal plants. So in a sense, you can even say, forget about climate change muna. It's just bad economic decisions that are driving this. Does government hear? Some do, others don't. It's because most people, especially young people, are not heard yet. You need to work with others to increase your voice so that you can all be heard. In this administration, in this school, but also outside it. This is our current power picture. 47.5% of our power generation relies on coal. 70% is from Indonesia, yung imports. No? 75% of our coal is imported. 70% of that is from Indonesia. Which means the more we rely on coal, the more we are reliant and dependent on other countries for a polluting source. This needs to change because we need to grow the share of renewable energy to increase energy security, to ensure that electricity prices become more affordable, and because they'll be more reliable in the long run, because they're ours. If we are going to decarbonize globally, the first domino to fall is not only fossil fuels, but coal. The projections are that coal needs to be phased out by 2030. Good climate policy is not just about energy. Why does it make business sense? Because if you want to make everything more resilient, dahil alam mong mas lalala ang impacts, you need to upgrade everything. Infrastructure, infrastructure, bridges, supply chains, food supply, urban services, logistics. Lahat kinakailangan i-upgrade. It means more jobs. And more jobs means pump priming the economy. It makes business sense to actually take climate action massively. Not just in energy, but in all other areas. As we adapt more, as we become more resilient, we also help the economy develop in a quicker way. A lot of the changes that have taken place in Philippine history and global history is not because someone knew the future and knew exactly what would happen. Change took place because people already knew and accepted that they would contribute something of themselves, whatever the consequence is. Because it just might help. It just might count. And that's the law of the universe. Every little thing counts. Everything adds up. And it's a good reminder as we look at not just the impacts, but also the solutions. To change everything, it takes everyone. It's incumbent upon us to approach big problems sideways. How do you approach big problems sideways? This is one illustration. Acupuncture. Many people think of acupuncture needles, but very few think of the basic science behind acupuncture, which is something that you should grapple with as students, as young adults. If there's a problem, you focus on this alone. Many times, you can see other areas where if you create the right impact somewhere, the effects will be on the source of the problem. That means that your needles, if you were holding one, would be most effective if you also think about your work as contributing to the bigger problem of climate change. And it's not necessarily going to be about science, or politics, or energy, or infrastructure. It will be about things that you'll probably see later as you find more, discover more about your abilities to be better as citizens, as Filipinos, as students, as young citizens of this country. Oftentimes, most often than not, when we have climate discussions, somebody is bound to say, kasi kaya may climate change because of population. Dahil may population problem tayo. Sideways thinking will show you, as evidence will show, that population is not an issue, at least not today, in terms of climate change. This is emissions. And this is the poorest, this is the richest. The humongous part of global emissions is from the richest of this world. So population is not an issue in terms of climate change today, because the bigger part of the problem comes from the minority who consume and produce the pollution that has created the problem. So climate change is not because of population. However, it might be a direct cause or effect or problem contributory to the crisis later. The solution is in empowering women and educating girls. Why? Because if the population increases and they all aspire for affluence, and the means by which the population of today have attained that affluence, then we'll be in a bigger mess. But if you think about it, educated women, empowered women, will always prefer smaller families and more manageable spending and a more efficient way of dealing with costs of a household. So in a sense, if you want to contribute to solving the climate crisis, it's not simply about energy transitions or infrastructure or better transport, mass transport. Your call is also to say, empower women, educate girls. It sounds counterintuitive or pretty much offline, but it's sideways thinking. Malaking bahagi ng problema natin is because of refrigerants, source of air conditioning, F-gases as they say. If we create more energy efficient buildings, which produces natural light or natural cooling, takes advantage of natural sources of cooling, then we use less air conditioning or refrigeration. Transport. If we follow the logic that we should move people, not cars, then we solve a large part of our problem. Kasi hindi traffic ang issue natin ngayon. It's the fact that people do not have mass transport options. In fact, traffic is a twin of all major developed cities. And it will not go away. But it should also be okay because traffic should be a problem mostly of people who can afford cars. If we had mass transport, that wouldn't be our problem. Kasi the goal is not to move cars, but to move people. Why? The great majority who use our commons, roads, streets, highways, are people who own cars. If we had more mass transport, then it would be more democratic, di ba? Plant-based diets, because the more meat you eat, the more emissions are produced, whether it's pork, beef, poultry, and so on. It's a little harder to talk about if you're a Filipino, but it's something really to consider. If you want to contribute to bringing down emissions, it's not only a shift to more plant-based diets, but also to tell others that there are less emissions-heavy, energy-intensive ways of producing and consuming your food. As I said earlier, empower women, empower girls. Because anyone who says population is a problem is ignorant of the fact that they shouldn't be screaming population is a problem. They should be asking, why aren't women empowered? Because more empowered women, as I said earlier, will mean smaller, more manageable families. The more educated girls are, then the more empowered they'll be when they grow up to be women, which means less consumption, less energy intensity, less emissions, better for climate change. So whoever is part of feminist groups or believes in women's rights, you're onto the right track. And the more deeply committed you are to that track, the more you can contribute to the climate crisis. Work with others with a better sense of agency. Work together. Be bigger. Make your voice stronger. Express yourselves better. Be citizens first to yourself and your household and your community. In that way, you can be a better citizen of this country by being more active. See yourself as someone with agency. May lakas ka, may boses ka, and alam mo yung crisis at alam mo yung parating, at alam mong hindi magandang parating. Individually, we're not as strong. Together, we can be better. And if you know that what's coming is really tough, then we need to be acting together very soon. Accept that the world will be remade into a future that you deserve. Wala na tayong choice. Lalo kayo, walang choice. If you prefer to be apathetic or indifferent, that's okay. But do not doubt that you will have no means of escaping the future that's coming for us, like a zombie lurching towards us. We can defeat a bad future, but we have to act with a sense of urgency by working with others. The problem is great. That's right. Malaki ang problema. But as I say in the last bullet, no? Save pessimism for better times. Saka na kayo mag-alala pag maayos-ayos na ang mundo. Sa ngayon, we need to be optimistic that our collective actions will actually matter. Sabi ni Jane Hirshfield, one of the better poets living today, what some could not have escaped, others will find by decision. Each we call fate. The moment we part ways from this room, the decisions and fates that we will have will all branch out. No? But we will all make many decisions, you more than I would, because my time on this planet is lesser, that will show you a lot of challenges and different ways forward, branching out, forking into crossroads. Don't be delusional in thinking that whatever you do will not matter, because it will. Everything will count. Maybe as a speaker, I wish I could have spoken to 1,000 students. Doesn't matter, because I multiply the possibility of change now by the number of people in the room, with the hope and the optimism that you will each find your own way, and that you will believe deep down that you will matter.